Welcome everyone to the Voice of the Terminus show. I'm Yarnila, joined by Josh. Say hello, Josh.
Hey guys.
And we have Lex with us. Say hello.
Hello.
And in the background we have the wonderful Shy, our moderator, as usual. Say hello.
Hello.
And let me put my headset on so it doesn't bounce through the frickin' microphone. So today's discussion is going to be about crafting. We're going to look at trade skill advancements, additional trade craft that they could possibly implement later on into the game, and look at ways to make crafting more involving, more engaging, and also look at ways to modify the way crafting's been handled, because as of late, most games crafting is like second rate. You push a button here and there and off you go and start, producing the goods that you do. Some games had the right idea of how to do it, but they kind of drifted away from that because it became, for some people, tedious. But I quite enjoyed actually having to go through different processes. So Josh,
Yep.
do you want to throw in the first idea, first thought?
Okay, well, I do think that trade skilling needs to evolve from where it is currently. I think traditionally it's just been a case of every expansion you're just bumping it up by another X amount of points to appease the trade skillers. Once they've leveled that up and got the few patterns that they've been granted, then it's being bored for another 11 months, 10 months, or whatever the case may be. So how do we actually develop that and try and make sure that the crafters get as much love as the adventurers in the game? Things that... Sorry, yeah?
No, I was just going to say, that's a good point. Go on, carry on.
So basically, how do we go about making sure that every trade skill class has got some development going from expansion to expansion? And the way it could probably be done is not through just points wise, but maybe through different various skills to enhance current patterns, current equipment that you're making through the trade skilling and enhancing the skills of the trade skiller, whoever that is, to improve on certain items. So an example would be a blacksmith. If he is making, for instance, a chess piece, when he goes into this new expansion, he might be able to now, as the blacksmith, increasing his skill within his craft, make sure that the durability is now doubled maybe on that item, or areas where there might be an extra buff to make the armor lighter for carrying purposes. So yeah, I think those are areas which we can go into. What do you guys think?
That's actually a pretty cool idea. Looking at, that kind of ties into the situational gear aspect of things as well. When you look at your gear that you've got, like for instance, like you said, the blacksmith creating a chess piece, and let's say for instance now you've got a paladin or a warrior wearing some plate armor, and they're going into like a zone where it's a desert, for instance. Maybe that blacksmith can modify that armor to be lighter, like you mentioned, but without breaking the core piece. So basically modifying the armor accordingly to the situation itself as well, giving meaning as well, and adding in that sense of, you have to know your whereabouts, you have to know what's going on, where you're gonna go. It's definitely a major time sink if you think about it, having to modify your gear depending on what kind of environment biome you're going into. But it would definitely make it more interesting, more immersive. And if you look at what VR have talked about and how they've talked about crafting, it's going to be a very vital, vocal point in the game. It's going to be so important to have crafting, have crafters in the game. They mentioned gear being almost on par with stuff that drops out of dungeons or drops from raids. So, you know, the crafters are going to definitely be there in the forefront.
Yeah, I just hate for them to just suddenly pick up a pattern and then make gear equal to raid-worthy type of gear. I think things like techniques and should be learnt along the skilling up of that particular class. So a blacksmith can learn a technique from a specific type of master blacksmith within a certain zone, for instance, over time. And that will allow him to enhance his skill.
You could also have like these you know, so-called master blacksmiths spread out throughout the world that have different techniques on them that you can learn as a blacksmith, kind of making you earn your way to becoming a master blacksmith yourself. So that could be the ultimate goal later on. Because another thing as well to quickly point out is, I don't want to be a master crafter as soon as I've reached max level. You know, it's a trade craft. It's, you know, it's like in real life. It's an apprenticeship I'm taking on. So it should take me a long time to become a master crafter of sorts. So you can have like these, to kind of touch back on what you said with having like master craft, you know, master blacksmiths, you know, special envoys out in the world that teach you different ways to modify the armor or different techniques. That could also be a process that you do from the get-go as well, rather than just going to that blacksmith's anvil and oven where you melt down the metals and everything. Maybe you have to learn those steps before you can even use the oven, use the anvil and everything. So you basically have different techniques that you have to learn, like in I know people hate that game, but like in World of Warcraft, or like in Terra, you first started off like making ingots, or, you know, breaking down the metal pieces into bars and everything before you could actually go and start crafting armor pieces. Something similar along that line, basically, where you learn the different techniques, because blacksmithing isn't about just going to an oven and off you go, hit the button, and you start creating stuff. You melt down a sword, you form a sword, you connect the handle to the sword itself and everything. So those are like 3-4 different processes you have to go through, and that's something I would kind of love to see happen with all tradecraft. Obviously, depending on what tradecraft it is, there won't be so many steps. So some will have lesser steps to go through, and some would have more, like the baker, for instance, having to basically mix the ingredients correctly. That would be a cool thing to do as well. You could basically have like a mixing component where you mix ingredients. You add too much of this, it's not going to be as good, or it's going to be overcooked. So it's not going to be as durable as it would be normally. You have to kind of get the process right, and you could do that with all of the crafting areas. Yeah,
100%. Just also to go back to, for instance, the techniques, it can also be not only from master blacksmiths, it could be also from maybe ancient books that you find in raid zones, or in the open area zones as well, where you could get ancient techniques that you could learn that way. So there should be multiple ways of getting this type of knowledge as a trade skiller at the end of the day.
Yeah, definitely. Lex, you got any thoughts?
Well, I don't know, kind of in my own little thought bubble here, because, well, to those who may not be familiar with us, I'm a big PvEer. I do a little bit of PvP, not a lot though. But I desperately want to be a crafter. There's been maybe 2 games I enjoyed crafting in, and I've played a lot of them. I think for me, it's because the PvE, or, you know, we'll just say the general play style, is so far detached from the crafting style of the game that it's it almost feels like it's all or nothing, at least for me, to where you have to dive in or don't even bother. I don't really care for that methodology, to be honest. And then I start thinking about actually doing the crafting in games. It's go pick up junk, put it in your bag, press a button, wait, repeat. You know. Whereas when you are doing something along the lines of, we'll just say, grouping in a dungeon or raiding or doing a 2v2 arena, you know, there's a lot more to it than just click, click, click.
Yeah.
You know? And I think that's one of the biggest issues I have.
Yeah.
To me, when I think of crafting, I want to feel like I've crafted something. I want to feel like I'm skilled at what I do. When you have, say, a really excellent healer in a group, you know that person, although there's a healer is a healer, this person is a particularly good healer.
Yeah.
And you want to surround yourself with people that are skilled and obviously you can get along with. But why can't crafting be the same way?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Why can't I put in the time to use a system that does require a bit of skill? I'm not saying a lot of skill, like a big, massive elitist style like community that will evolve out of crafting. No, there can be. There's nothing wrong with that. But why can't I craft, feel like I've earned my spot amongst crafters, and be proud of the things I make? You know, when I go into a dungeon with my friends, and we're having a hard time killing a boss, and we finally kill him. Everyone, when you're on your Skype or your Discord or your TeamSpeak, whatever, you're all yelling and screaming, yeah, you know, that was amazing. You get such a rush from that. Same thing with raiding. Same thing when you're doing the PvP and you beat that team that, you know, to take the first place on the server or something.
Exactly.
I want that feeling from crafting too. I don't want to just feel like when Josh gets his skill cap and then I get my skill cap, the only thing that makes us different is who got the recipes from the raid zone.
Exactly.
I mean, when I do craft, go ahead.
I just want to also say that I think the enjoyment also comes out of it is also not knowing. I would also like to one day, if I'm crafting something, suddenly get some sort of a crazy result that creates a sword which is totally different from everything else that I've created.
Right.
So I've
mistake.
created a mistake sword.
A happy mistake. Be all like Bob Ross. It's a happy mistake.
Exactly. And that you can proudly walk around with that sword and say, oh, I made this myself. You know, ooh, where did you get that thing from?
And it might be something that you might not be able to recreate. You know, it's a unique item.
Exactly.
I like that. I can see there being an issue with some folks where when you create something of that caliber, you want to be able to recreate it. But in my mind, for me at least, I'm thinking that if I can make that over and over, it's no longer special.
Exactly.
Yes.
I mean, you might
should be a 1 in 10,000 chance or 100,000 chance.
Or whatever they wanted, whatever number works.
I mean, they've had things like this happen in multiple games where if you go through a successful crafting process, you might get a rare item, you might get a buff that basically embraces you and stuff like that. So why couldn't they do that with the process that we've talked about? But I want to quickly step back a few steps and talk about what you talked about, Lex. You know, having it engaging, having it different, and talking about the time process as well. Like, let's say for instance now you're creating a sword and you're on this anvil and you're beating down, you're forming the sword. You could have a process basically where you have a certain kind of timer system where if you hit that timer correctly, that beating down is going to be perfect, right? And you can have like mishits and everything, deforming the sword, making it, you know, making it less valuable or making it pristine and stuff like that. And as you go along, as you gain that knowledge, the better you get, the more successful you're going to be, the more quicker you're going to be in the process of making it, the less you're going to have fail hits and everything. So once you've gone through that step, and obviously it's going to take, you know, creating thousands of swords maybe before you reach that point where you can do it in your sleep. But that's another thing that you could do as well to kind of break it down and make it different. is...
See, that's something that's actually popped into my head before. I'm usually an armorer or a weaponsmith. Now, if I was a weaponsmith, if you look at the process of blacksmithing, there's a lot of factors to it. You have to make sure that, you heat your metal right. You have to make sure that, it's you don't beat it when it's too cool or stuff like that. But I mean, there's tons of these little videos of like smaller metalworking shops. Go watch one. Mm. There's tons of mini games that you can do to this. Why can't I take I think it's called a billet. Could be wrong. I'm not a blacksmith. Please don't hold me to this. Basically your metal. You put it in the fire. You heat it up. Why can't a small mini game be making sure it's the right temperature?
Exactly.
You have to visually watch it. You don't want it too cool, but then when you pull it out and you take it to the anvil to start beating it into shape, why can't that be another mini game? You could do a very slight rhythm game because there's a lot of rhythm to hammering your metals. You could add a little bit of accuracy to it, where it's like, your target, your ring is where your mouse is, and you aim it. You try to keep it in the ring as you're hammering it on a rhythm. As an example, I'm not saying do it. I'm not saying it will work.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, just as an example.
And
to me, those little systems make me want to be a skilled crafter. I know that if I've made this great item with my name on it, it's because I am a great crafter, not because my skill is high.
And that kind of brings in the whole purpose of, accomplishing something. If you want to become the ultimate adventurer and reach max level and have all the greatest gear and everything, it's going to take you forever to do that. And if you want to be ever so fulfilling, you want to be the completest, then that goes to crafting as well. So that's another major process as well that you have to go through. And those points that you mentioned, Lex, melting down the metal and making sure the oven's heated, you could maybe have like a mini game where you have the oven, you throw in like three logs of wood in there, and that's basically the perfect heat, and that has like you kind of see it cooling down as it goes, so you've got to keep that up. But quickly, Josh, let me quickly finish and then I'll let you jump in. But that could be a process as well that differentiates the blacksmiths amongst each other, or any crafter amongst each other. You've had so much experience melting it down, but your hammering is shite. So now you've got Josh, who's been hammering for it forever and ever. He's really good at that, and that kind of basically makes it even harder to find that crafter to go to. Rather than say, "Hey, I'm looking for a crafter. Can you go and do this?" You're gonna think about what do you want to do with your item. What do you want to get out of it? And you could have different bonuses, different outcomes happen depending on what you're doing. If you're on the anvil breaking down the sword, it might have this. It might add this effect. If you're melting down the metals and you get it right, it might have this effect. So it kind of makes you also think, as a paying customer, where do I go to? Who is the ultimate? And obviously somebody's going to be the ultimate blacksmith at some point. That's going to be the go-to guy, and that would basically be something that everybody else will look up onto, is becoming that. And that's what you could do with every single tradecraft. You could break them down, look at how they work in the real world, and what kind of processes could you take, like for instance with alchemy, making poisons and everything, mixing the components properly, boiling it properly, stuff like that and everything, having the proper glass vials, for instance.
Blowing your glass correctly.
Blowing your glass correctly and stuff like that, so that it doesn't break in your pocket or whatever. Stuff like that. Yes, it's technically a game, and this could be taking it too far, but this kind of brings crafting into a new era where, because I would love to have a game, an MMO, where I can decide either I become an adventurer. Or I focus purely on the trading aspect of things, on the crafting aspect of things, and play 10 years the game just doing stuff like that, crafting items and engaging with the cities and trading goods and buying goods and selling goods and everything. That could be my my ultimate fulfillment if I choose to as well. Why isn't something like that in an MMO? I do not understand.
Yeah. Now, just to expand on everything that you've been saying, that Lex has been saying about the keeping the heat up and the vials, for instance, you could ultimately have like your own kiln, your own area where the smelted metal runs into to create the sword, etc. You could buy all those things, but it's going to cost you a ton of gold. And that's something nice that you could actually maybe get over time, is that you actually, when you are going up, you might find an enchanted kiln, some sort of a way to create some sort of enchanted kiln, for instance, or you can have it made specifically within a certain city that are very good at blacksmithing themselves, so it gives you bonuses for those type of things.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Well, I mean, yeah, I love that, because, like, say for an enchanted anvil, it has to be super hard for this certain type of metal, whatever you want to call it, unobtainium. This brings other crafters to help crafters. It will bring crafters together, which is what happens in the adventuring world, where we need to kill this, but we're one group short. You get another group of people who also need it for a quest, and all of a sudden people are coming together for an adventure. I just don't see why you can't do the same thing for crafting. Yeah. Especially like when you take into account a little bit of skill, I'm not asking for these things to be like super hardcore until way later.
Yeah.
But that whole aspect, granted, you could have a passive skill that does increase or at least help you get around the chances of going whoopsie, you know, I sneezed and I got off target or whatever. You're going to find your blacksmith, your alchemist, you know, you're going to find your tailor or your leather worker. And you are going to be very dedicated to that person because they provide the quality and have the skills that are what you want. You know, this also means that those crafters who are exceedingly skilled at what they do are going to have a line of people 4 blocks long waiting to get stuff made by them.
Yep.
Which that sounds like a problem, but it is and it isn't, because all those people, they're not going to want to wait 4 days to get that sword they want. It's all going to trickle down to the people who are not quite to that level. But who's to say that if I'm exceptionally skilled at crafting and Josh is still very good, who's to say that his weapon, the difference between what we would have crafted, is really that big of a deal? Like, I'm not talking like 50 DPS or weapon ratio difference between them. Nothing like that. I'm talking like maybe a small percentage increase for me, where it's like, yeah, if you're a min-maxer, you need to seek these people out.
I want to quickly touch on what you said though, Lex, with having, you know, the different races have maybe unique upgrades or craftables, basically.
Right.
That could also be something where I might be a human in Thronefast, and now I go to and I've got a friend who's a halfling who's in Wild's End, and I need something done to this sword because somebody's come to me and asked me if I can craft this sword, and I've got the basics down, but I'm missing that one component. I might be able to give that sword to my friend who basically finishes it off for me. So you're kind of socializing. You're kind of it's kind of like in real life. You're sending your wares through multiple stages. You know, and it comes back to you, and now it becomes your imported product. It's now your product again because it's come back. So it goes around. It's like a supply chain,
right?
So you go around,
and that opens up a whole new side of crafting.
Yeah,
because I know a couple people who they love playing the auction houses and stuff. They love buying the supplies, having a crafter make stuff, and then selling them. They love being that kind of. I'm not really sure what the right word is. My brain's not working. But that opens up that position in a game where crafting is similar to how we've been talking. I could be, heck, I could be a crafting skill of just a supplier.
Yeah.
Where I just buy stuff from gatherers. I mean, it's not an official skill or anything, but you know what I'm saying. I could go buy ore from bulk from a couple people in this area because I offer them, you know, I'll buy it from you here instead of you run it to town. You know, they do that. And then I take it to town. I sell it to the crafters. They make stuff for me, or I can just give it to them and say, make me this stuff. They make it. I can go sell that. And all of a sudden now, you've got a thriving economy. Granted, there's a lot of work that has to go behind it to make sure everything's balanced.
Yeah.
But it would be a thriving economy based on players, which is a whole nother topic that we'll probably touch on a little later.
Yeah.
Because I don't like all player economies.
Oh, yeah, there should be a fair mix.
Yeah.
But, this is definitely a good way to advance the whole trade skill process and, you know, bring the social aspect together. So, Josh, I'm going to go and bring us, unless you want to quickly add something to this.
The only one thing that, I don't know if we'll touch on it later, but with that group crafting, for instance, it would be pretty cool if you had like a 5-slot workbench type of thing that you as a group could slot into it, and then you would have to obviously time the various processes along the chain to create items, and because you're part of a group, you get additional bonuses and possibly additional effects to that item you're going to be creating ultimately, that you can only create within a group type of structure.
Josh, you just blew my mind, and here's why. Probably about a month or two ago, I watched a video on YouTube, a documentary on traditional ways of crafting katanas. Don't ask why it came up or why I even watched it. I just click on videos sometimes. And I thought it was interesting that the master swordsmith, he's basically holding the sword down as it's being hammered, and the apprentices are on either side, and they're hammering it to a rhythm. He and the master moves the sword as needed. If you were to do group crafting and you could pull that off, not only does that show like amazing coordination and teamwork, but my God, I think I'd actually ask someone to go crafting with me.
Yeah,
that would
exactly.
that kind of ties into something I wanted to bring up as well. Looking at the group aspect of things, that could also tie into the mass production as well.
Yes.
Where in some games they added the features mass production, like in EverQuest 2. But the way they did it, basically, it was an AA system that you went down and you could basically go and mass produce stuff. Now, I liked the idea behind it. The process, how it was done, was just terrible. The way I see something like this working is with what you just mentioned, Josh and Dex, a group crafting situation, where maybe I can, get friends within the guild or from the community and say, hey, anybody up to crafting? I've been told somebody ordered 100 swords for whatever reason. They want 100 swords done in a timely fashion, so I can now go and create these 100 swords. I've obviously worked out some price that they're going to pay me for me doing this. Now I could message them and say, hey, look, I told you I could do these 100 swords. It's going to take a long time for me to do them, but I found a way to speed up the process. Are you willing to pay a little more? And then basically, you talk with your people that you grouped up with, and you split the profits. That's one thing you could do for the
that's a good one.
Split
those profits.
Split those profits down to those people, so everybody's getting something from it. Maybe you have people that have certain skills, like we talked about earlier on. The one that does the melting, the one that does the anvil hammering, the one that does the binding together, and another one that basically carves an inscription on the sword or something like that. I don't know. So those are things that you could possibly do with that, and by doing that, you basically you could gain ways to speed up your skill process so that you have a better understanding. So it's like it's almost like the group crafting in EverQuest 2, where you went into the zones and you had to go and create certain items to get. I think it was a chest with some rare materials in it and everything. So it's kind of like a similar system there, where you had to do different aspects of things. So you needed like a blacksmith to do something, and you need a carpenter to do something. And depending on what you crafted, if it wasn't of your trade, it was almost hideous to craft, because you would fail so much. So this is kind of like a similar system, but in this case you're taking like 5 blacksmiths to create this chest piece or this sword or whatever, or this armor set, for instance. And by doing that, you could also, to quickly touch on to the next system that we can also throw into the room, apprenticeships. Something where once you've reached max level and you've done maybe a few certain quests, gone and spoke to certain NPCs within the city that you reside from, you might be able to learn to become a master teacher of your tradecraft. And you could basically hire NPCs to basically take on an apprenticeship in your shop or in your trade area, and after a certain time period, they could maybe become NPCs that actually sell for you while you're offline. They take care of your day-to-day business with your shop if they have those kind of features in the game. But this also goes to the same thing with players, though. What's to say we can't take on players? Look at it like mentoring. A way to help those that are struggling to kind of come along,
get into the swing of things.
Get into the swing of things, exactly. You're basically passing on knowledge that they ain't quite privy to yet. You're helping. You're basically helping them along the way, and you're getting something out of it as well at the same time, kind of thing. You could you could like have a. It could add to your faction, to your respect, to your your crafting persona, your crafting. So basically, you could at the end of the day, you could gain special titles by having somebody go through your apprentice thingy majig program exactly. Oh my god, I'm lost for words today. I'm telling you, I think we're all over.
Well, the thing is, like, I like that idea because, like, we'll say just for Pantheon, as an example, you have a fantasy setting where you can throw all the rules to the wind. You could create some crazy new metal, and maybe I'm just getting into that level of blacksmithing, and I'm having a heck of a time. My stuff keeps breaking. I don't know why. Well, maybe Catharsis comes along. He's a master blacksmith. And he says, oh, you're using whatever this is called. That's the reason it's breaking, is because when you put it inside the forge to heat it up, you have to wait until it turns green.
Exactly.
Not white hot, green. Because it's a crazy kind of metal. And it's like, oh, I never would have thought it. And all of a sudden, now you're engaged with the community. You're learning through each other.
That's actually a cool. I love that. That's a cool system, actually, having like different heating points for different metals. And that brings me quickly to kind of touch on Tradeskill expansioning as well. Because we talked about this earlier on. We're fed up with the same old. An expansion comes out. Hey, guess what? I've got 10 new craft levels, but guess what? I'm going to be creating the same stuff over again. Just that this time it's another tier. You could add that aspect to it as well, where you might need that metal from that new zone to create the new gear, but you still require the old metal as well. You have to fuse them together.
You have to create an alloy. That's another thing that I really wanted to see in some games, or some crafts, I should say, because experimenting works with some, like alchemy. It works great. Blacksmithing, it works okay. I personally can't see how it would work into tailoring, but my idea of experimenting with tailoring is, look, I just sewed this sleeve to my hand. But, I mean, you could create alloys, and all of a sudden you've created a whole new metal based upon the mixture that maybe you discovered, maybe you didn't. Maybe it's something that's already in the world. Or maybe you learned it from a recipe somewhere.
With tailoring, there could be different types of weave and needle
Different
needle
stages,
patterning
maybe.
you need to do
Right.
You got like padding, for instance. You could add, like, for instance, you know, Lexer the blacksmith's created this chess piece, and now you got Josh the tailor. He could add a padding to that chess piece that gives you AC.
So you don't chafe during your dungeon runs.
Exactly. And with the alloy, for instance, it could be the case of you've got this new leather piece and this old leather piece, and if you blend them together, you get a new kind of padding with a complete different bonus to it than what you would get if you only took the normal padding from the new expansion and just basically tried to turn that into a padding.
Right. I mean, when you bring in the experimental side of certain things, you basically say that anything can technically go. You just need to find it out. Like, you could say this unobtainium, you mix it with some iron, and all of a sudden now a whole new alloy. And
you got to get your ratios right. You got to get your ratios right.
Get your ratios right. Maybe it acts differently.
1 part iron, 2 parts unobtainium, etc., etc.
And I just want to quickly
maybe you add some orc blood for flavor.
You know, we talked a lot about blacksmithing here today, but that's, you know, this is just because
it's just the easiest one for me to go at.
Easiest one that's been thrown into the room, but this goes for all the trade crafts. You know, even if we look at harvesting, for instance, fishing is kind of a trade craft at its own as well. You know, I shouldn't be able to just throw my rod out.
Stuff with, you can do group things with fishing as well. You can go on a fishing boat and fish and throw out nets basically as a group.
Yeah.
Or you can hold like a makeshift fishing competition. Like add a mechanic for it that's just, you know, everyone puts in some money. It's almost like gambling, but you're fishing for it.
Is it? Josh, can you just quickly say something? I got Lex breaking up. No,
testing.
Test.
Yeah, you're kind of frozen on my end. Oh, there you are. You're back now.
My connection is bad. I'll be right back.
All right. So, while the cameras get messed up, and they're back fixed. So yeah, looking at the whole apprentice system and everything, with, you know, opening up shops and teaching people other stuff as well. I want that to also be a process that is basically, it's not something that you gain straight away. You have to prove yourself. And that also goes with, like, becoming a master crafter. When you become like a master, you've reached max level, for instance, as, you know, in the core game, you've reached level 50 in crafting or whatever the level's going to be. That doesn't necessarily give me the title of master crafter, but it might open up options where I might be able to open up a shop now in you know, Throne Fast or wherever, whichever city I reside in. You know, those are things that you can maybe work towards to. Maybe you could work towards to, you know, the trading aspect of things. So, by getting a better, you know, buy price and a better sell price with the local merchants within the town or the city or the residing area around it. And this brings in another idea. So most of these games are designed this way. You have gear, it lasts for, you know, 5-10 levels, then you switch it out to the next tier and so forth. And then basically you go and you toss that old stuff away. You go to a merchant, you sell it down for a bit of coin or whatever. So what about adding in a crafter only NPC that basically buys back the old stuff that you don't want to wear anymore? You as a player, any random player, can go to this NPC. You can sell the goods there to that NPC, but an adventurer can't buy anything from there. Only the crafters have access to that, to basically bring it back and break it down again into its core, you know, components, experiment, salvage maybe from it, to see if they get something out of it. You could have like you could add like random bonuses to it, you know, that technically weren't there when you made it, but maybe through the process of adventuring they stumbled upon something, they engaged with a certain NPC, and you could have like random random salvage effects happen. Like you get a rare material out of it. That's not part of that, you know, original sword itself.
That's exactly what I was going to mention now as well, that you just said, is when you salvage stuff, magically salvage stuff ultimately, is that at certain points you might pick up like a rare block of material that you've never seen before and will give you some sort of a unique item at the end of the day. So there's definitely a good way to introduce salvaging into the game for that to be important.
Yeah. I mean, you could get kind of crazy with that too. You could basically say that there's a chance to get, you know, a semi-rare drop if you magically salvage it. That's called like the Essence of Heroes or something, where theoretically, you know, maybe the person used the sword for so long that a part of them was imbued in the sword, and now the salvager has extracted that, which could be used in other recipes.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, really, with a fantasy IP, heck, with most games, you really you're working very loose limits. You
can get away with almost anything if you put some thought into it and add a reason to it, and you know, it's free game. It's basically off. You know, whatever you think of, just make sure you have a backstory to it. Make sure you know it fits your lore in it. You can do almost anything if you want.
There's a reason why it is the way it is.
So let's go and have a look at some additional trade skills that one could possibly gain through expansions, or when expansion comes out. You know, what possible aspects there could you see happening? Because I'd rather have something unique happen to my tradecraft when an expansion comes out, rather than having those extra 10 levels to craft, and you know, off I go and get the recipes and start crafting this stuff. What could possibly happen there? Are there any advancements you could see that basically bring your blacksmith to the next level? Obviously, we have to, you know, take into account as well, you know, are some of these tradecraft, or are these tradecraft archetypes? Will there be broken down aspects to it? So you've got a blacksmith who becomes a weaponsmith or a armor smith. You have a tailor who becomes a leatherer or a clother. Or maybe even somebody that creates just bags and you know, stuff like that. And then you've got the woodworker who becomes maybe somebody who becomes a master bowsman or a master staff, or you know, wooden shields, and so forth and so forth. So you can break down these individual trade crafts into multiple sections for one trade skill and only a few for the other, which I would be perfectly fine with. You know, it doesn't have to always be the same. You know, not every craft has to have the same equal possible paths you can take. But so taking that into account, what could you see happen? What would you like to see happen that kind of adds on to what you have already learned? Is there anything that comes to mind?
If we take your example where you add different subclasses, so to speak, to each trade skill, then there definitely has to be certain things that you become specialized in within that area. So let's say that you use the blacksmith as an example, and you are a weaponsmith now all of a sudden. Well, your blades and your items that you craft are going to be super unique, and you are only going to be able to utilize certain patterns that only you can find, or you can only speak to other weaponsmiths found in other cities to be able to craft those things. So it focuses your drive towards those areas of the game, as well as being able to give them unique bonuses ultimately.
Yes, you could basically break down the weaponsmith or the armor smith. So he becomes a mastercraft in, you know, with breastplates, with chest pieces. So that's his internal specialization, his additional, you know, trade skill that he could take on. He could still craft the other stuff, but he's specialized in chest pieces. So now he gets that extra something something, the same as with the woodworker who becomes maybe a master bowsman. You know, he's now focused on bows. He can do staffs, he can do wooden shields, he can do arrows, he can do this. But he's focused now on bows. So he's, you know, if you want to get a really good bow from somebody, that's the guy you go to. If you want to get really great arrows, that's the guy you go to. So it kind of basically spreads out the market as well.
Well, okay, from the way you described it there, it's almost like saying you specialize in the production of a specific item rather than evolving your trade.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, to be honest, there's not a lot of ways you can evolve a trade.
Yeah.
Because blacksmithing is blacksmithing. There's just a blacksmith who focuses on armor.
I mean, you could evolve it technically through, not through yourself, but through the crafting tables that you have. They could evolve it there.
Right.
They could basically bring out a new crafting table that combines two systems into one, or you know, or basically speeds up the process. So, and those are things that you would have to obviously work to. You know, you require a lot of resources to build it. You would have to do a lot of experimenting, blah blah blah. Put a lot of money and time into it to get these individual pieces. You could even take the crafting tables and break those also down into tiers. You know, so you start off as a apprentice level 1. You got an apprentice level 1 workbench. Then you know you start getting better. You become an apprentice level 2, and this is yourself evolving. Apprentice level 3, and then you become a foreman or whatever. Then you become this. You become that, and you basically, at the end, you're the master smith. You're the master tailor. You're the master this, and you can also purchase these crafting tables that also help you along the way as well. Maybe.
Yeah.
Now, I got 2 off the rails comments right now. Arthur from World of Monsters TV basically said, like, breweries. If there was a brewer trade skill where I could actually brew different batches for different stats or whatnot, that's probably the only thing out there that would ever make me give up armor smithing.
That would actually be a cool idea.
That'd be very cool.
Looking at cooking, for instance. Cooking is so far-fetched. You know, it's so exploratory. You've got all different kinds of cooking, but when you look at the trade skills, you've got the cold drinks, the hot drinks, you've got the hot food, the cold food, you've got fish, you've got meat, you've got this, you've got that. So why not break it down there as well, where somebody can create unique drinks or unique hot foods and so forth, and like, you know, with the brewery, for instance. So you could basically break down the cooking down to brewing. And brewing doesn't necessarily have to just be alcoholic or cold beverages. It could be hot beverages as well.
Correct. It can be imbibed with things to help you as you adventure. You know, double the duration of what a drink does for you, type of thing. Or
you could even you could even take alchemy, for instance, and break that down into multiple components or compartments as well. Poisons, heal stuff,
imagine this.
Bonuses.
Imagine this. I'm a brewer. Okay. Now I've got my old faithful stout that I always brew when I go for my friends when they go on adventures. What if exactly? It gonna make you hot. What if you find through experimentation a way to add, say, like a healing potion to it as well? So now what this does is not necessarily a healing potion replacement. What it is it could add a hit point regeneration, a small one. But
that reminds me of Obelix, who fell into the potion pot, and now he's super strong because he's got that. He's drunk from that special.
Exactly.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Asterix and Obelix, dude. Come on. Don't tell me you don't know about Asterix and Obelix.
You guys have to
read my god.
So good. You're missing out on so much.
It sounds familiar, but that's about it.
You gotta read it. Very, very good.
But yeah, that's actually, those are the things. But additional tradecraft as well. Animal husbandry.
Yeah.
Right.
And that could be something
you could raise chickens for the chefs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, technically. I mean, but those are things that you could add on, and they don't necessarily have to. They could be something. Because I would also like to see additional tradecraft that I can learn as well along the way. I've picked my master trade skill. I've become a blacksmith or a baker or a cook or a woodworker or an alchemist and everything. But you've got like first aid skills. You've got learning maybe animal husbandry. You've got maybe learning about hey, archaeologist, finding rare symbols, items within.
I'd almost call that an artificer or something.
Or, yeah, something like that, basically, where you learn about the world itself, relics. They could put in stuff into the world that has absolutely no meaning to us. It's absolute nonsense for us at first glance. It's almost like with the so-called Fiery Avenger or whatever it's called, the sword from Brad, that was out there in the world, or this item that was out there, the hearsay. And this could go with that system as well, where you might learn about certain old cultures. They could like have that added in as a trade skill, and that could even hint at maybe a future expansion coming up, a reveal of a future race, and it could be like a wild goose chase for you. It's something to pass the time.
You could also discover maybe ancient techniques that you find on a scroll, which you can sell to on the broker, for instance, or something like that, to blacksmiths or alchemists or whatever, to enhance their skills ultimately. So these are the things you could find in old jars and whatever as a archaeologist.
Thinking about that, wouldn't it be, I'm not saying good, I'm not saying bad, but wouldn't it be interesting to, where you have your recipes, instead of looking up at this window and getting a list of stuff, you're obviously building stuff through your methods, right? It's almost like a modular crafting system. What if you were, it flips up a book, you're skipping through the pages, you try to find like, oh, how do I make bronze? Oh, okay, I got to do this. And it's not handwritten notes, for sure. But it's like when you discover it, it goes in, it's nice and neatly readable, it tells you everything you really got to know to make it happen. And you could add stuff from those artificers or whatever to where it adds a new page to the book, where it's like, oh, well, now I know how to do this stitch and tailoring, because it shows you how to do it. And when you're doing the minigame, you're doing that stitch, and it's like, oh yeah, it's certainly something that it's got me thinking about how I might react to a system like that.
Yes, it's like Kat said in chat. It's almost like the perception keepers,
right?
The keeper system. So it's a similar system, but for crafting that keeps track on everything. Basically, becoming a keeper. In the adventuring side, it keeps track of all the perception and everything, all the questing that you've done. So it gives you all the vital information there. So that's a similar system you could do with the crafting.
Yeah. So let's say, for instance, you find a very rare recipe, for instance, in a dungeon, whatever the case may be. Now, there's 5 different steps to create this item that you have. Now, 3 of those steps may involve techniques that you haven't even found out or learned yet, but it gives you some sort of a clue that this is an ancient whatever race technique, and then you might have to go do a bit of investigation within that city, for instance, to find out what that technique is that you have to learn, and you have to go discover another technique somewhere else from another area. Yeah. So it becomes quite an involved process to make sure you can create this item.
What if that technique, though, that's described in the book, is actually 2 techniques from 2 different cultures that you have to learn?
Yeah, exactly. You have to combine them.
So once you've gone and explored that, and you've actually you've gotten from the halflings, for instance, and you've taken from the dark mirror, all of a sudden you might get a perception ping for that specific thingy, informing you, hey, you've actually finally learned how to weave that particular weaving system.
Correct.
Now, I'm just going to put there because something that would drive me nuts is really wanting to do a recipe, not having the one technique, and not knowing where to get it. That would drive me bonkers, especially if it happens multiple times. What if, like, I'll just use stitching as the easiest example. Any stitch will work, but the stitch that it recommends you gives it more durability, makes it sturdier, or makes it a little more flexible if you're a leather worker or whatnot. You know, it's those techniques that help you alter the end result, rather than saying you need this to make it. Because, excuse me, if I sew a shirt together, I guarantee you the minute it gets snagged, it's probably going to rip because I don't know what I'm doing. Because I don't know what stitch to use, but I can still make it shirt.
Yeah.
You could even do that, and then you could basically maybe that book has a list of the stitchings in its rarity. So you've got the common stitch, then you've got the uncommon stitch, then you've got this stitch, then you've got that stitch, then you've got the
whip stitch, and then you got blanket stitch,
and then you got the special stitch, and basically, as you go along, these could be things that you unravel without knowing about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what if, like, we'll say, just as a quick example, a whip stitch. I think that's like the only stitch I actually know. So if I was playing a tailoring game, or sorry, a tailoring mini game, God have mercy, a tailoring mini game, and I just happen to do the whip stitch because it's what I know. I should unlock that in the book that says you figured out the whip stitch. It's like, oh, so my knowledge, limited though it may be, does carry over a little bit, and it actually makes you feel like, hey, maybe I can do this because maybe I can figure some things out. Maybe I have to find some help.
Yep. I quickly want to jump back to something though, with the whole apprenticeship system as well. Another cool feature that could happen, I don't know if we mentioned this, but this is why, you know, hey, if we did talk this up already, I'm sorry. My mind's not all there today. But talking about recipes, for instance, maybe that's one of the perks that apprentice gets out of it, is learning a recipe from you. Rather than having to go and find it in the world, or go to a broker, or buy it off somebody for expensive money, he can learn that recipe from you directly by teaching him that recipe.
Right.
I think that would be pretty cool, a cool system to implement.
Right.
Yes, okay, it would take down the whole aspect of, you know, being able to sell those recipes more frequently. That would obviously devalue...
Not unless you add a lot of options.
Yeah.
Granted, there's only one way to stir a bowl of mush, but I mean, you can get creative.
Maybe it's when, you know what, you can stir a bowl of mush, but whether you add those beans before or after you've done a minute worth of stirring enhances the flavor of that. Yeah.
Well, you could even go one further, looking at the system you guys just described as well with the stitching. Maybe recipes in the world have different techniques specific to that recipe that's dropped. That recipe
you can even say specific to the culture, because you could say with the whips, like as using the whip stitch example, every 3 stitches it does 2 horizontal ones. It's not a whip stitch at that point, but it's an offshoot of it.
Yeah.
And it's not, I don't think it's a real stitch for all I know, but you add it to a game, and honestly, no one's really going to care because it's something new, and you know that if I do this, this is what happened.
Because that would kind of make the recipes even more valuable and more unique as well, because not every recipe for the drop for the Coldane steel chess piece is going to be the same. You know, it might require a different way to finish the product, depending on whatever you do there and everything. So you could have like different variations of that recipe dropping, but with different abilities on it, how you do it. So you might be a blacksmith, Lex, and Josh is a blacksmith. Josh has learned that technique, so he's going to definitely be hot for that. You haven't learned it. You purchased that anyway because, hey, you might learn that sometime. Or you might have somebody who comes along and says, hey, I'm looking for this recipe so bad. I need it with this specific blah, blah, blah. You can sell it for a lot of gold to him, maybe. So it kind of brings that value there as well. Yeah, so... And
I'm going to make one thing abundantly clear, because I'm sure by the time this hits YouTube, there are going to be people who are just fuming and throwing their mics across the room. But anyway, a lot of the changes that, at least that I'm talking about, are not major changes. I'm talking about minor shifts to slightly customize an item the way you want it, to where it's enough to make it worth it. So let's say if I was, as a Dire Lord, I have the option to be a DPS. Well, maybe I play him as a DPS and I want more strength. But maybe Josh plays one as a tank and he wants more stamina. You could create the same item tailored for the person's needs.
Yep.
Just ever so slightly.
And that basically...
To a min-maxer, it's still worth doing.
And it makes the items in themselves unique as well, because they're going to be different. Not each steel iron longsword's going to be the same, because like you just mentioned, one's going to have an extra bonus to strength, the other one's going to have an extra bonus to stamina, the other one's going to be focused on wisdom for whatever reason, and so forth and so forth. So even though it's tailored by that person, that crafter, it's a different sword in its own right. So that kind of opens up the possibility to kind of create your character how you want to play. And we do know that all the stats that are going to be available to you are all going to have some kind of value to you, regardless of what class and race you are. You're going to need some kind of charisma, some kind of intellect, some kind of strength, some kind of stamina, some kind of agility, you name it. You're going to need all of these stats somehow to function, and depending on
not necessarily need, but they'll be valuable to each individual person, however much they want to value them.
Exactly. You're going to have obviously those stats out there that are going to be of importance to you. Like, it makes sense for a healer to look at wisdom, for instance, but you get my point. That's what that's because that's another thing that really kind of is broken in these MMOs today. The stats don't matter anymore.
Right.
I mean, the game starts out with 5, 6, 7, 10 different stats, and they were all of they had all some kind of function towards you.
Right.
Be it your parry, be it your AC, be it your mitigation, be it your how much you heal, how much you absorb, this, that, and the other. And then these games start mana regen, exactly. So all these things come into account. But nowadays it's like you've got 2 stats, that and that. But what about the other ones that are still in the game for some unknown weird reason?
The biggest sore point with me in EverQuest 2.
Oh yeah.
Sore spot, because in EverQuest 1, as a warrior tank, it was still useful for me to have agility, to have dexterity. In fact, it was recommended. It was even useful to have items that had a lot of charisma for when I'm selling stuff. Every stat was or did have some value to me. And with EverQuest 2, when it's like, all I do is stack 2 stats, then why am I seeing like 80 different stats on this stupid item?
Yeah, exactly.
Drove me nuts.
Yeah, I think if stats are going to be extremely important, then specializing in specific items, as for instance a blacksmith or whatever, should provide the best primary stats for your class that they can make.
Yeah, I mean, and that's that's something that if I'm not interested in crafting myself, it would make me interested in the crafting process.
Yes.
Because I'll know if I get a new chess piece, it's good. Granted, it is an upgrade, but I know I can make it just a little bit better for me and my play style.
Mm.
Why would I not do that? Why would I not seek out a crafter and do that? Because my personality means if I know this can be better, then it's going to get better. So it brings me, who is a person who isn't a crafter, into interacting and being social with the crafting community, which is never a bad thing.
Mm. Definitely. So another thing that Shy brought up earlier on, before we went live, was another way to look at, the tailor, for instance. When you go and craft something, you have like a doll, where you actually put the pieces together to see what it looks like before you go ahead and craft that item. Another thing she brought up as well is like mount gear. If we have like horses or wargs or whatever, four-legged land animals we can ride, having gear.
I'm gonna strap a chicken to each foot.
Have actually gear be something that affects the speed, the agility,
you can create hoof plates, for instance.
Horseshoes.
Horseshoes, there we go. That's the word.
Right, exactly.
I'm pretty useless with words tonight.
Right. Well, and like Arthur from World Monsters brings up again, breeding. If there was animal husbandry, you would obviously want to breed the fastest horses because people want fast. That is probably, a fast horse isn't necessarily going to be able to carry a lot versus like, what's the name? Clydesdale.
Ooh. You could,
they're slower, but they can carry a lot of weight.
You could even go like this. You could even, obviously, the cities are going to have stables and sell you horses and stuff. But if you add animal husbandry or breeding into it, where a player actually becomes a breeder, that's you could kind of have like an additional bonus, because that particular horse breed is actually, it's full breeded. It's actually breeded over time again. But a stable guy is going to have any kind of horse in there. So you could kind of add the value there to somebody taking on that craft additionally for breeding the animals by saying, hey, his breed's going to be better than the one in the stables.
Right.
So you're going to go to that player specifically.
It's kind of like buying a car. If you need something that's going to get you from point A to B for the next 5, 10, whatever years, you're going to go to one of the mainstream dealerships, an NPC vendor, right? But, you fancy yourself a super or a rock star or something, those aren't going to do. You're going to want to go to the Ferraris, the Lamborghinis, the Bugattis, which would be the players, where they specialize what they create.
And you could basically limit it as well there. So you have, this being a breeder of sorts is something that a lot of people can do. If they have like 50 different kinds of horses out there, you would have that's 50 different breeders out there, because you could only breed one specific. It's like when we used to have cats, we bred Persian cats. That was the breed that we bred. We bred Persian cats only. Period. We had different cats as well, but the breeding aspect of things for us in real life was the Persian cat, and that's what you would do with the players as well. They would pick a certain breed that they want to go for, and you could even add difficulty and levels to how easy it's going to be, how hard it's going to be, how long it's going to take as well. The better the breed, the tougher it's going to be for you to actually get a reasonable breed out of it.
And when VR release the Beastmaster at some point, then that'll definitely become important for them. Yeah.
Oh God, can you imagine like a Beast Lord from EverQuest 1 who could actually breed their own warder?
Well, that's the thing. If they brought out that class, for instance, because that's the thing that somebody's going to bring up. I guarantee it. Well, if you have if you have people breeding, and then a Beastmaster comes along, then he's useless. Actually, no. What the Beastmaster can do though is he's not restricted to one breed. There you go. That makes him valuable. That brings him back into the whole, I want to play a Beastmaster because I can breed multiple breeds. I'm not limited to one as a normal player.
No.
But, you know, I know the first thing that's going to come up in any comments, that you shouldn't have class affect your trade. And to a point, I agree. But in using the Beast Lord as an example, pets were so incredibly important to them that in a way it does kind of make sense. Would it suck being on the outside looking in? Well, yeah, grass is always greener.
And I'm sorry, but it's going to be, I just want to add one thing, it's going to be even more important in this game to actually breed, like for instance, a wolf that might become like a frost wolf that's going to be able to deal with the elements of ice and fire and all sorts of things.
It would make
like things
very interesting. Not saying good, not saying bad, just interesting.
But the thing is, though, where is that kind of like interfering with class and craft? Because that's what the Beastmaster does. Yes, you have an additional trade skill called breeding, where any player can basically come along and breed a horse or a wolf or whatever is out there. But the Beastmaster in itself, that's his trade anyway. He breeds anyway. It's got nothing to do.
He's one with the animals.
He's one with the animals, so that's got nothing to do with the trade skill. So he wouldn't even need to go in, earn that trade skill or take it on, because he would automatically have it. And he could have, you know, specializations or animals that we as normal breeders can't breed. Like for instance, wolves or dire wolves.
What you could do is you could even say that maybe a Beastmaster style class doesn't have the ability to breed more or any number of things at one time, but they have a larger pool to draw from. So let's say as a Beastmaster, I want to breed horses because it's just the game's new. It's the it thing to do because everyone wants a horse. Well, maybe a regular player would be stuck having to buy horses from an NPC vendor, breeding them, getting the pedigree up to the point where it's a very valuable horse. But the Beastmaster could technically go out in the wild, tame a wild horse. You might get a little crazier on the stats, not saying better, but a little all over the place. Whereas an NPC one would be probably a gentler curve. And I could see that appealing to a lot of people. You save money, but it doesn't necessarily make things easier for you, because you could technically go tame a lame horse.
Yep.
Well, that was waste of time, you know.
Exactly. Yep. I'm trying to think. I think we talked through almost everything that we wanted to look at today.
We have run our mouths pretty well.
Shy, is there anything from chat while we, gather our thoughts? Maybe, I'm sure we've forgotten a few things that we talked about prior to the show, but is there anything from chat? Any ideas, thoughts, questions?
We had 2 questions. Kidrich wanted to know, what about long and increasing timers for learning stuff like an ESO? How do you feel about that system?
I freaking hate them.
I have absolutely no clue, because I haven't really played that game and witnessed that. Can somebody enlighten me, maybe?
Well, I haven't played that much either, because I kind of lost interest in it 3 months ago. But for me personally, if you're going to put something on a large timer, in my mind, that's a poor design choice. Why not make it more involved process, and then make it so that it's actually taking me a good amount of time to do whatever it is I'm doing, and then instead of just let's say for instance mastering a certain recipe. Okay, if I can read a book to master it in one game, but I can only read those books every 2 hours, why not make the process take my personal time to get better at doing it? Maybe the book just shows me how to do it, so I know what I'm doing is right, but it takes me enough time to where I don't want to sit down and just constantly read all these books, It's in my mind, it's just like a lot of things with ESO, just a poor design.
Mm.
So it's Kidrich is adding a
so
addition to his answers to his question there on the side.
I kind of want to throw in an answer there real quick. Just reading through. I'm kind of in favour, but not 100%. It kind of touches on what we talked about earlier on, about having that kind of process, but the better you get at your tradecraft, the easier it becomes, the quicker you become at doing it. So it's kind of like a reverse engineered way of doing it. So you start off making that sword, and it's going to take you some time to do it. Using the additional areas to use the anvil to melt the metals to bind it all together, you name it, that comes into effect as well. But the better you get at all of these individual systems, the faster you get at it, making them, the better you get at them, the quality is going to be better. That's kind of how I would like to see it be done, rather than how it's mentioned there, having like 9 levels for each catalogue, and basically the further you go along, the longer it's going to take. I'd rather prefer later on down the road, when it comes to the bigger stuff, the more uncommon, rarer stuff and everything, that it's more of you using the knowledge that you've gained to create those items, and basically through that process the outcome of the weaponry that you're creating is going to be affected that way, rather than it being a long process, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, using the example that was in chat, I mean, I understand why they did it. But again, it feels lazy to me. Well, why would I want to shoot to the highest quality one if I know my skills aren't there, and I could be potentially wasting materials and time? Granted, I might do it just to challenge myself maybe once, but you get like a critical failure that ruins all of your efforts, and suddenly you're like, okay, let's work my way up to it, and it's still going to consume way more time than that timer. I'd
rather have something like that basically be something that I can like kind of unveil. I have this sword, and it's for whatever reason it's level 3. And now I'm in a dungeon or exploring the world, and I come across this recipe or this scroll or whatever, and it's about my sword, and it tells me hey, here's level 7 or here's level 9, and then I can basically skip through the other steps and just go straight to level 9, rather than having to go through level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5, and burn out so many resources, have the fear that I've messed up a step along the way. It's a similar system with what Terra did later on with their game. You could basically upgrade your weapon from from tier 1 to tier 12 or something like that, and then you could basically use their cash shop to unlock a super rare version of it, and just all the other items that you got in game were useless. There was no point in getting another weapon, because the weapon that you could basically tier up was the ultimate weapon for you to have in your level range going through. So it's kind of similar to that. Obviously, it sounds like a little more intense and well thought out in ESO than it did in Terra. But yeah, I kind of would like to see something like that go in that kind of direction.
Yeah. Just to add to that animal husbandry idea from earlier on, it would be pretty cool to go out and start cataloging the mobs that you come across throughout the world. And as an animal husbandry trade skiller, the more that you catalog within your book, for instance, the more access you have to breed certain animals in the world.
Yeah.
So that could be a way to enhance that trade skill.
And another Go on, Lex.
I was going to say, there is literally sky is the limit here, and the more we sit here just running our mouths and just thinking of just random ideas. The more I'm severely disappointed in past MMOs. It's like you really either not care about that part of your community at all, or you're just a supremely uncreative person, which happens because I know people who couldn't draw a stick figure in a creative pose to save their lives. But
it's kind of like, the perfect outcome, right? Bear with me on this. Is an MMO like Pantheon, right? And it's what Brad said as a joke, where with our first interview with Kilson, where does he see Pantheon in 10 years? Pantheon, virtual reality, and Minecraft. It's kind of like that. There's not one MMO that has any system perfect. They either have a good crafting system or they have a good adventuring system. And
all efforts have been pushed to one way or the other, and then the other one just suffer.
And now looking at what VR want to do, the vision from Brad, wanting to create a world, that also involves the crafting. And if they could pull this off, where I basically I pick up this game, Pantheon Rise of the Fallen. I'm new to MMOs and I read about it. I look at the back. Oh, you do adventuring, you level up. I've done that in single player games. You go into dungeons. Oh, you group up with friends. You do this. Oh, you can be a crafter as well. You can do this. You can do that. Oh, I can actually spend my time just building stuff and selling it to people. Doing trade. Becoming a merchant, selling, buying. And then maybe they had a diplomacy system in there somehow as well, something like that. So now you've got this game where it's a fully featured game. It's almost like Second Life, the MMO, where
that game was nuts.
That game was nuts, yeah. But it's similar to that. That's kind of like the true fantasy MMO there, because you can become a shop owner. You can become somebody who's just a regular person. You can be the guy who delivers the newspapers. And that's kind of...
You could be the person that collects shoes.
Exactly. So, but, that's what, that's the missing link to an MMO, to making it fulfilling, is let people decide how they want to play your MMO. Yes, it doesn't, the core game is designed around the adventuring, the PvP, the PvE, the raiding, the dungeons. But that's only because you haven't explored, or actually, you've got shutter eyes. Open up. Go like this, and I'll have a look around. Oh my god, crafting can be a complete, utter entity of its own. So can a diplomacy system, so can this. There's so much they can do to make it into a breathing, living world. I wouldn't know where to start. I'd be like all over the place, like, because I'm a fulfiller. I want to craft. I want to do the adventuring. I want to do the raiding. I want to do all the dungeons. I want to do all the quests. Yep. I'm going to be spending so much time. I'm going to be sitting here going, right, what do I do today? Is anybody on from any friends on? Is anybody on the guild? Can I go and quickly do this crafting thing? I
will say that is actually a dangerous situation to get into, where there's just too much to do.
Oh yeah, definitely.
That comes down to having a well thought out introduction for new players.
Exactly.
Older veteran players probably not so much, because they know right off the bat, I'm going to be a raider, I'm going to be a PvPer, and they just go headlong into that, and there's nothing wrong with that. But we have to kind of sit back and understand that as the years progress, there's more and more people that are trying MMOs for the first time, and if we don't try to make it a little easier for them, because let's face it, back in our day, it was not easy when you first started. Granted, a lot of us look back at that fondly.
I mean, there definitely has to be a reasonable...
but I mean, the kids today's, for the most part, I don't think they'd be able to handle that kind of...
Well, there's two sides to that. They couldn't handle it because they don't know any different. So it's going to be up to games like Pantheon to, show them that, hey, this is how it was. And don't forget that Pantheon isn't a game that's going to be for everyone. They want to be, they want to be or hit a specific group of people in a niche
Right.
product, as they say.
Well-
Yes, it can be a lot more than that. It can expand out to other people and to other gamer types. But
I think I misworded what I said. Because what I said almost sounded like taking challenge out. And that's not what I meant.
no worries. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is, though, Lex, is the way to basically make that a success is, like you said, have a fulfilling introduction, informing the player in all the possible options he can get into, what that involves, what kind of time, you've got to really think about this. This is if you want to achieve everything, it's going to be very time consuming. There's a lot of things you can do. It's going to come down to introducing people into that. And obviously, what we talked about is all theory craft today. It's just, spitting out ideas, looking at ways to modernize, to revolutionize some of these systems and everything. And that's all we basically do. None of these have to be in the game or should be in the game or are coming into the game. And these are just ideas. And, even with what we discussed today, even the depth that we went, even the slightest little piece that they take from it that we haven't thought about or looked at, that kind of, modernizes or spices things up, will go a long way. So, it's that's the best thing that can come from all of these discussions that we do week in, week out, is that something from chat or from us, a discussion that we're having here sparks
that wildfire in someone else's mind and creates. An event like that could take a system that they have been working on to being good to being fantastic.
Yeah,
just to get them on a different perspective. That's really all we're here for.
Well, speaking of perspective, we do have one more question.
Yes, because I am running short on time.
Before you guys keep going. From Catharsis22. To force interaction between player and crafter, do you think we need durability on items? Something where a player needs to see a blacksmith to repair sword or armor?
We actually talked about that prior to the show. Josh, you were in favour of that, and so was I. I would like to see a system like that, where, your sword's going to become blunt over time. Unless it's a katana or something like that, some weird Japanese sword, it's going to become. We just lost Josh.
He's out. He's like, I'm done.
I'm done. That's it. He's no.
How do you guys?
He's out of here.
he's completely gone. He's not even green anymore. He must have had a complete wipeout or something. But Josh talked about that, having the durability as well, and I would love to see something like that, to an extent where I might have to, get myself a new item or go to a blacksmith to get it fixed if it can be fixed or something like that. And depending on what's happened, what kind of item it is, this, that, and the other. Yeah, I think durability would be a cool system to have. Lex?
I'm actually the opposite camp. I don't like durability, but that's because WoW has jaded me towards it. And to explain that, when I was doing all of my raiding, I literally had to do my dailies every single day, and it just barely covered my repair costs. Because I was a warrior, and we got hit with crazy repair bills. Now, if there was a durability system that was a little more fair, a little less, oh god, we need to get tons and tons of money out of the system, or even just tested.
Well,
I would probably be a little more willing to try it.
What about this then, Lex? We talked about this already. We've mentioned this already. You're a blacksmith.
In, guys?
Yeah,
hey, you're back in. We hear you. We talked about this. You're a blacksmith, so why couldn't you technically be a repairsman in the field?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a good way to add, or to actually bridge that gap between crafting and adventuring. If there was something like, say, you could hire a blacksmith to increase the durability of my metal items. That would also be one more step in the direction to where the durability system might become a little more tolerable for those that are, on Team Lex, down with durability.
And that's a way to break it down as well. You could have the blacksmith who can repair chainmail and plate mail, for instance. And then you have the tailor. If you've got a tailor in your group, they can stitch up your cloth and your leather and add the durability there. But in the cities or in certain NPCs throughout the world, they repair everything at a more higher cost, for instance, because they take care of all your needs. Whereas a blacksmith, if you've got one on your group or you run past one, hey, I'm a blacksmith, I'll repair your goods, give me a bit of coin, or if you've got some harvesting material, I'm looking for this. There's so many ways to kind of pay the system back, pay that person back. It doesn't always have to be related to a high maintenance cost of money. It could be, hey, have you got 10 metal ingots? Oh yeah, I've got 10 metal ingots. Here you go, I'll repair your gear for you.
Here's the thing with the durability system. If let's say it's a very kind durability system, meaning even if I'm a raider, okay, I don't necessarily have to spend a fortune every day. It could be maybe every other day or every 3 days as a raider. I think I'd be fine with that, if especially if players are able to repair that for me, or if there are ways to at least augment the items for the amount of durability so that I can get to that point. Because the minute I feel like all I'm doing is repairing broken gear, or funneling all my money into just maintaining my current level, I'm going to get very tired of it very quickly.
Well, that's the risk you run when you raid. At the end of the day, if you die often, I loved that system in EverQuest 2. To be honest, when you died, you lost 10% durability on your item, till it went down to 0 and you couldn't wear it. I was perfectly fine with that. Yes, it was tedious. It was a high cost. But through experience and everything, we got better. You had repair kits and stuff that helped along with that. And
also the rewards from the raid as well. You used to get a lot of gold from being successful in the raids as well, which helped you repair those things.
Exactly. So it comes down to basically how is the game going to be designed when it comes to the raiding? How is it going to be designed when it comes to the death system and everything, with the durability, if they have that or not? Because if I die, then my armor should die with me technically. I got a major dent in my plate. I got beat down. I'm dead.
It's another one of the death penalty discussions right there. Because I don't mind losing durability. It's in the case of WoW that I was literally going through hundreds of gold a night. Hundreds, not just like, oh look, I got a 40 gold repair bill for the entire night.
Well, that's where you need to kick your raid buddies in the butt.
Yeah, but we were all serious. I'm not going to say professional or hardcore. We were serious about our rating. But when you're trying to push through new content, there's going to be trial and error. There's going to be mistakes. There's going to be everything. And granted, there does have to be a penalty to that. But in the case of World of Warcraft, at the time when I was playing, it was so harsh that I had considered rolling a different class, like a druid, to tank, simply because my repair bills would have cut down by like a fifth of the cost of warrior.
But the swings and roundabout in those situations is that when you have managed to get through that raid zone, you've got 9 months to farm and build up your gear, your gold that you find, etc., for the next set of raids that get released down the line.
Well, what about a system where obviously plate armor is going to be the toughest to penetrate? Then you got the chainmail, then you got leather, then you got cloth, and so forth. So, depending on what kind of wearer you are, cloth's going to have the lessest durability. So, for instance, if you die, 10% goes. If you're now a leather wearer, maybe only 7% goes down. If you're a chain wearer, maybe each time only 5% goes down for each death you have. And if you're a plate wearer, only 3% go down each time you die. So giving you, as a plate wearer, being a tank or whatever, or a cleric,
I don't have to repair as often, but my bills are higher, versus repairing more often, but the bills are lower.
Exactly.
Again, pending proper balance, it could be considered acceptable.
Yeah.
But
I'm just very, very leery of those.
But one final thing before we end the show that I wanted to bring up, what we discussed earlier on as well, is looking at your recipes that you get. Would you like to see, this is going to be a speed run, so turn your noggins on. Would you like to see something different on how you gain your recipes? Would you like to see something done differently? Rather than you kill an encounter, he has a recipe on him. Or, you go to the broker and you buy the recipe. I mean, we've talked about a few ways of doing this already with the apprentice, learning your recipe from you and everything. But in general, would you like to see something done differently when it comes to recipes?
Yes. Short answer.
Yeah, as well.
Yeah. I mean, if you look, at our backdrop, it's like a kind of little laboratory. Why can't finding recipes be a part of exploring your environment? Why can't learning recipes be a quest?
Why can't recipes also be you creating them and doing some sort of creation path that you actually have over a period of time? So it might take you a month to create a brand new recipe, ultimately, if nobody knows.
Why can't you just play around for a few hours?
I would love to see
crafting and then discover something new.
Exactly. I would love to see recipes be spread out throughout the world. So you have you've got your factions, your NPC, areas, cultures, and everything in the game. Through objects, for instance. Maybe I scavenge through some baskets in this ghost camp or whatever. There's no more people there. I'm lost for words again. This abandoned camp site. There's a graveyard, or in a graveyard, and I stumble upon this recipe. I find something there, and that might be only for that specific culture or that specific, from that specific race. Especially when I look at if they have carpentry, for instance. I would love to, instead of just going out there killing certain NPCs, I find the recipes for carpentry. I would rather have that spread out throughout the world, and I can go to the halflings and maybe purchase a few there. Maybe I have to go and learn, do some tradecraft there to learn something about their different carpentries that they have. And the same with out in the world with different factions and NPC cultures and everything. Maybe some of them do. Maybe some NPCs drop certain recipes. If I kill a woodsman or whatever, something like that. But maybe they have them in their camps somehow as an object that you can find or discover and everything with the investigate skill or something like that. Kind of like a mix and match of how you engage with the recipes, rather than they're dropped and you can sell them to an NPC, or if you're currently that craft, you can read it into your book, into your recipe journal, and off you go. I'd like to see something different be done. Yep.
So anyway, with that, unfortunately, I am out of time.
Yep. So anyway, we're going to wrap it up now. We hope you enjoyed this discussion. Next Friday, we will be talking about how to utilize the darkness, to utilize the light, utilize certain aspects of the world to bring really fulfilling dynamics to how we engage in those situations. A prime example, to quickly give you a general idea, we're in a room, it's pitch black. Now we attract NPCs, we hear noises, we hear rustling, we hear weird sound screams, and they're all coming towards us. You know, we might need to have a light source. So boom, we bring up a light source, it kind of draws them back. So talk about ways to how to utilize the darkness or hide ourselves within a dungeon. You know, we have our flashlights on, we're in a dungeon where NPCs are attracted to that kind of thing. So you turn off your
Whenever
torch.
it's dark, just set the halfling on fire.
And then basically off you go. So things like that we're going to look at and explore next week. Anyway, thanks for joining us. And we will see you all next Friday. Take care, everyone.
Be safe, people. Have a good
Have
weekend.
a great weekend.